when every bite matters? What if the food on their plate could affect the story of their later life? Mary Merheim helps carers turn mealtime stress into moments of nourishment and dignity for those we love most when every spoon matters. If you are caring for someone else, whether paid or unpaid, and no matter how many hours you do it, did you realise that you may be missing out on thousands of pounds of discounts for things that you may use every day? The Able to Care podcast is proud to be sponsored by the UK's #1 carers card. Started by two best friends who recognise that carers deserve better and are 100% committed to helping to change the lives of all carers and bringing them together as a strong community. Carers Card UK provides support, recognition and rewards. It offers reassurance by providing an ID card that helps access emergency information when needed, while also unlocking discounts, a wellbeing hub, a carers circle tool and a community through their app. All of this for less than the price of a box of chocolates a year. There are discounts on gym membership, days out, electrical goods, clothing and even glasses. Let others know you care while taking a little care of yourself with an ID card you can be proud of. Visit carerscarduk.co.uk/promo code/able to care today to order yours. Hello and welcome back to the Able to Care podcast. I'm your host, Andy Baker, and today we're talking about something all too often overlooked, but absolutely vital, and that's nutrition in older age, especially for those living with frailty, illness, or change. Now, for many carers, whether family or paid, it's not just about what's on the plate, but what it represents: health, connection, dignity, and love. My guest today, Mary Merheim, an elderly nutrition consultant, has spent over 10 years helping families relieve the anxiety around meal times. She's the author of Navigating Nutrition in Later Life. She offers one-to-one coaching, workshops, meal planning help, and on-demand courses, all designed to support carers in making nourishing, stress-free choices. Today, we'll explore what goes wrong and why, what often goes unseen, and what practical changes can make an enormous difference, so that those in our care are not just nourished, but nourished well, emotionally, physically, and with respect. So, Mary, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hello, thank you very much. What a great introduction.
It was, I was pleased with it. I think it's meaningful. I think, obviously, nutrition in elder care, there's a lot of stuff misunderstandings, things that people don't always quite recognise, the challenges for the elder care. So it'd be great to kind of go through some stuff. I know many of my listeners, whether paid or unpaid caregivers, so family members or professional carers, will find this really useful. So starting off, what led you into this particular subject on nutrition for older people?
Well, that's a very good question. It's something I have started in later life, really. I took a break from teaching. I had a 25-year teaching career to look after my own father, who was late 80s and just wasn't doing very well, really. He'd been an incredible chap. We lost my mother when she was 58, so we're talking 30 years on. And in those 30 years, I suppose what we'd call now is a foodie. I mean, he made his own pate. He put his life and soul into experimenting with food and nourishing himself and playing around. I remember, to our disgust, he bought what we call a tongue press, which is he would buy a tongue and then put jelly in it, and to me, he was a very, very scientific chap, and he really loved doing that. Anyway, so fast forward to late 80s, and his oomph had gone, and he'd lost his interest in food, and he was just failing, really, for no good reason other than he just didn't fancy very much at all. And I just wouldn't let that happen, really. I didn't want him to just fade away because he didn't fancy eating. That didn't seem right. That didn't seem the proper way to go. You know, he wasn't really ill with anything. So he and I sort of played around in the kitchen and created a few bits and bobs and sparked his interest back into food, thankfully. Anyway, so obviously I regained his interest in food, and he became stronger and whatever. But, at the end of the day, I couldn't stop him falling off that cliff. And sadly, he died in 2018. At which point I then became what's known as an end-of-life doula. So I would support families who wanted to have somebody or bring somebody home to die, basically. And I helped facilitate that. I was kind of a project manager, shoulder to cry on, liaison officer, you name it, story reader, whatever, supported the whole family through end of life, really, which was absolutely a privilege and a huge honor. But in that process, I also discovered that this loss of appetite wasn't just a him thing. It was so widespread and so individual, and people were just floundering, looking after their elderly relative who always used to love their roast dinner on a Sunday and were losing weight. And your natural instinct is to push more on somebody almost, because you think, well, come on, you must eat more because you're losing weight, which probably we'll discuss a bit later on, is not a very positive experience for the person who's struggling to eat. So that sparked my interest. And in the background, I was creating these things called grand bar cakes, which is what I'd made with my father, which are really nutritional cakes because he just wanted to eat cake. Again, we'll talk about that later, why older people eat sweet things. So the two things were going on, my interest, my creation, and I then gained a qualification in nutrition, and it just became this huge wave of enlightenment to me. But then I suppose being a teacher, once I knew stuff, I wanted to share it with other people as well. So, and it just, the word spread really. And I've been as you say, I've been supporting people for a while now with their family members who are struggling to eat, and it's a very stressful situation.
That is a huge passion project for you, and obviously sparked by your father's love of food and interest in food and the care for him as well, that maybe kind of sparked that a little bit. But why is eating well so important as we age?
Oh, goodness. It's unfortunately not eating well, but to turn it up the other way, means that we are much more prone to infection. Our immune system goes down. We don't have the strength to fight off illness and disease, and we're more frail. You mentioned frailty earlier. Frailty then causes falls, and then if you're not well nourished, you not only have that fall initially, but then you're very slow to recover, and you will be faced with lots of circumstances where you will be put in a different situation and appetite can be lost. I'm thinking of sort of going to hospital or something like that. You need a bit of resilience. But yes, nutrition is so important to fend off the inevitable. As I said, with my dad, I cannot stop anybody falling off that cliff, and nor would I want to, really. Otherwise, it'd be a very full world, and no one would have the honor of parenthood. So, nutrition is vital in later life to keep what independence people have, to keep people strong, to keep people out of hospital, and then to get people back home from hospital as quickly as possible.
And what makes it harder then? So obviously you mentioned your dad, going off his food or becoming disinterested slightly in eating well. But this is something that we commonly know of in care settings, and I'm sure many families listening experience as well. So what makes it harder for older people to maintain their enjoyment of food and nutrition?
And that is the nail on the head, really. Why do people lose their appetite when they get older? And again, having done a lot of research, experienced a lot of different people's lives, there's a myriad of reasons why in later life we are more likely to lose our appetite. Now, I do I do talks quite a lot, and there's always somebody in the room that goes, "Oh no, I've still got a full appetite." And absolutely, I embrace these people and say, I'm not talking to everybody. I'm just pointing out the pitfalls that might occur. So there are lots of reasons why somebody might lose their appetite. I'll give you a list if you like. Do you want me to go into that?
Let's go through it. Yeah.
Okay, so there's lots of reasons why people might lose their appetite. I mean, the first one is possibly my father's situation, in that you're on your own. You're more likely to be living alone as you get older. You've either got a loved one who's maybe had to move on and go into a care home, or you've entirely lost them. And so possibly the person that used to do the cooking is no longer with you, and you're a bit floored by the kitchen space, or just as commonly, the person that you used to cook for is not there. And so I'm as guilty as anybody. When I'm on my own, I'm not so inclined to make a good proper meal. And that's another part of it. Eating is such a sociable activity. It's such a huge part of society. We celebrate with food. We have family meal times round a table. It's so intrinsically a social activity that when you're on your own, it becomes a bit of a chore. So that's one huge reason why people do it. They're depressed, or they're lonely, or they're just flummoxed, really. Another one is you're more likely to be taking medication that might reduce your appetite. I mean, I won't go through all of them now, but there's heart medication. There's all sorts of medication that can lower your appetite. I mean, that's been proved recently with the likes of the diabetic drugs. It's now been turned on its head, and it's being used for weight loss. So if you go back into that, it then shows you that some diabetic medication can reduce your appetite. So that's one big problem. As I said, just going into a different facility, maybe you've gone into respite care for a little while, or you've actually gone into a care home, or you're in hospital, and meals will never be served on the same plate that you're used to. They'll be served at different times. They'll look slightly different. And if you're feeling slightly fragile anyway, that can just not spark your appetite. So that's another reason. Fourthly, I'm thinking of lack of strength. We do get frailer as we get older, generally. So, you may not be able to pick up the saucepan. I used to look after a lady who was in her 90s, and I would go in every morning and I would open her packet of ham. I would take the top off her milk bottle, because the arthritis or just the stiff hands that she woke up in the morning didn't allow her to get into the food that was in her fridge. There are simple problems that become overwhelming. I mean, she really thought she was going to have to go into a care home because she couldn't open her milk bottle. There's other things as well. There's I find this bit really fascinating, but as we age, obviously our whole body is deteriorating, for want of a better word, including our taste buds. Now, when I was young and at school, I remember drawing a map of a tongue, and you were shown where the sweet but taste buds were and where the bitter ones were, etc., etc. Well, modern day thinking is that each taste bud itself has different receptors, but the savory ones tend to, and not always, but the savory ones tend to weaken more quickly than the sweet ones, which is why as we get older, we gravitate towards sugary drinks and cakes and biscuits. The problem with that is obviously the lack of nutritional value in those. So that's another big issue. And then obviously you've got other things like dementia. Also, there's a lot of reasons, but if we can get down to why, we can quite often start working on a solution.
That's really interesting. I know there's some bits in there that have made me think, and I've made a note of them because they're really interesting. Kind of just thinking, yeah, absolutely. When I've lived alone, it's just that desire to cook isn't there. It does feel more like a chore than something enjoyable to do, because that's a social activity, sitting with somebody and eating, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I support families, and I'll quite often say to them, when you go and see Auntie Flo say. It's wonderful that you take a lasagna for her to eat when you've gone.
Yeah.
I'd rather you took a lasagna to eat with her. Yes. Because it's been proved study after study that if we eat socially, we eat more. So if you are visiting an older relative, an older friend, always take something to share, even if it is a packet of biscuits or something, but just always take something to eat, to share with them rather than to leave for them to eat alone, because I can guarantee that more of it will end up in the bin that way than if you were eating it together.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd also heard about the elements related to deterioration of the savoury taste buds. I've also heard that, I don't know whether this is right as well, and you correct me if you know it or you may not, but our predisposition towards bitter taste actually goes up as we get as older. So like children, we don't like bitter stuff because obviously bitter is usually synonymous with poison. So therefore that's, from evolutionary basis, but then that deteriorates. We become more susceptible, which is why, again, everything tastes more bitter. So we go off quite a lot of the green vegetables and stuff like that can be a bit bitter. I don't know whether you're aware of that or heard of that before.
Yes. I mean, I remember as a child hating broad beans because they had a bit of bitterness in them, didn't they? Yeah. Whereas I love them now. Absolutely. I mean, I do think that, that is totally correct. But I think as I'm talking sort of in later life, that I don't know, possibly it might go down. I'm not entirely sure on that one. But no, it's so interesting that our taste buds do change and we imperceptibly.
Yeah, and I think that's something we'll come back to because obviously that's really important for relatives to be mindful of, the fact that taste buds are changing, for instance.
Yeah. But and just thinking about it, actually, another reason why you might lose your appetite is false teeth or painful teeth. As we when we're older, even just getting to the dentist can be impossible. So you might have toothache. Your muscles and your gums shrink. So false teeth that you might have had before now don't fit very well, and it's unpleasant and it's uncomfortable doing that. So it's always worth encouraging somebody to go and see a dentist if they possibly can. And there's also a fear of choking.
Yes. So how can families kind of recognize or tell if poor nutrition is affecting their loved one? What signs should they look out for?
It's quite subtle. And I often do when I do a talk, I sort of have this big diagram of a very, very, very thin person at one end and a very, very large person at the other, and a sort of a spectrum of people in the middle. And I get people to say, who do you think is malnourished here? And there are the wise ones that say all of them could be malnourished, because malnourishment doesn't always look thin. It's an indicator. If you've got an elderly relative whose watch is looking a bit loose on their wrist, as I said, maybe the false teeth are a little bit looser, or they're using braces instead of a belt because their trousers don't do up so much, that's one indicator. But poor nutrition and malnutrition is different from undernutrition. So I always say to people, you can eat sausage and chips all day, every day, and you'd have technically a reasonable or a high BMI, but you'd still be very malnourished. So we have to look at these things. So there's all sorts of little indicators, which unfortunately also make us think that that's what naturally happens in old age, which it kind of does. But if you've got a lot of factors going on, so brittle nails, hair loss, poorer night vision, the more likely you are to have frailty, and just no obvious real no obvious real desire to eat. We often talk about, what you're having for supper tonight, or food, as I said, because it's a celebration, comes into our conversation quite a lot naturally, and that you might notice somebody isn't doing that anymore. So there's all sorts of signs that either someone's chosen not to eat very much, or they're not absorbing the nutrients from their food. So as I said, it's hair, nails, skin, vision, frailty, weight loss are all indicators, but there's not a one-stop sort of obvious sign, sadly.
I think it's quite hard as well. I suppose, as you mentioned there already, there's some of those are just signs that we might put down as aging. But I suppose is it kind of looking at the speed that those things are happening that actually seem to be progressing more quickly than we'd expect them to? It's not just age related.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that we don't know what to expect. You know, if we will, many of us have aging parents. You know, I often talk to what we call the sandwich generation. So people who are looking after their own children, their own teenagers, their own young adults, and suddenly also have to start caring for an elderly relative as well. And we don't know what to look out for. We don't know what the signs are. So I would almost, unless you're absolutely sure that they're eating as they were, I would assume that things might need checking up on and looking into. And you know, it's so important that you do have really good nutrition, as I said, because it keeps you out of hospital. It's so important.
There's a lot of talk now about kind of or greater understanding how nutrition actually plays a big part in things like mental health as well. Mm-hmm. So how does food affect kind of mood and I mean, can it even affect memory? Does it impact on dementia and things like that in later life?
Oh, to be honest, I haven't looked at any studies in depth about that, but it can. You can become we all know that hangry, irritability. We all get tired if we've not eaten. You know, we drop things. Poor nutrition in later life. The dangers are the same as when they're younger, but we can bounce a bit better when we're younger, and we can juggle a bit better. The consequences are much steeper in later life if we're not eating well.
Yeah, it's a principle of you are what you eat, isn't it? And therefore, it's the combination of nutrition, exercise, all of those factors. I suppose, again, if your nutrition's low, that's going to impact on your desire to move and be active as well. So there's always going to be that one thing has a knock on a domino effect to kind of everything else as well, doesn't it?
You're right. You know, you become more tired. And so you drop all those invitations to go out and meet people, and you choose not to do things, and you go to bed a bit earlier, and all those things that make your life richer as you age and become more important. You know, the contact with other people is massively important, and if you're not feeling very strong and you're not eating very well, as you say, you're not going to exercise, you're not going to build up any resilience. Your muscle mass will dramatically drop, which we all know is a hugely important thing to keep you stronger for longer. It has a huge impact on your health.
You indicated earlier, you kind of mentioned it briefly, that sometimes some of the strategies that maybe carers or family members try and use to encourage their loved one or the person they're caring for to eat might actually be detrimental or counterproductive. Can you just go into that a little bit?
Well, yes, and I was as guilty as anybody. You know, I'm not preaching because I'm here because I didn't know what on earth to do. And yes, I had a client actually whose mother was in a tricky situation a couple of 100 miles away, and so she decided to bring mum home. And mum was looking a little bit frail and a bit depressed, as you say, and just not herself and whatever. So this lady phoned up her husband and said, right, put the sausage and mash on for mum when we get home. It's her favourite food, lots of gravy. And so they brought mum home and they sat her at a table, and mum looked at the meal and just went, that's disgusting, I can't eat that. And this absolutely floored this poor woman, because it's like, but that's your favourite food. What on earth do I give you now? So we mean well. And I was pretty much guilty of, well, as long as he's eating something, it's better than nothing. Not really, sort of, but not quite. You want to feed somebody up, and you think the right thing to do is to give them bigger portions, or to inundate them with lots of beautiful meals on the table. And actually, the way to really help somebody encourage them back to eating is picky bits and little and often, and working from, well, what do they want to eat? If they want a bowl of cereal, we can fortify that bowl of cereal. We can start there. Or if they want soup, we can start there and then start adding things onto that when that we've caught that bit. And even just ice cream, you can make ice cream much more nutritious than it actually is by adding a few bits and bobs. I always try to say to people, don't be dictatorial. Don't assume that you know better, obviously. And I think we're probably going to discuss this a bit later, but there's a huge shift between a parent, which is what we're often talking about, a parent bringing up a child and introducing them to food and making them nutritious, which is what we want to do for our own children. And then that role reversal is a very tricky journey to go on, because it's very easy to say that you know best, or it's very easy not to want to step on toes. You have to find that middle ground to sort of appreciate where that person is coming from, what their needs and desires are, and the fact that they're 80 odd or whatever. I don't want you telling me what I want to do. But you work together, and as I said, you take what that person is wanting to eat and you work on it.
I think food is an incredibly emotive subject in a way, though, isn't it? As far as there are so many scripts that we have from a young age, as far as don't waste food. There's starving children out there. You should eat your peas. Like what you should and shouldn't eat, and how you should clear your plate, and that's kind of ingrained from a very young age. I should imagine when that changes, one, for the individuals who are experiencing it, they're going to be shifting, maybe feeling elements of shame, anxiety, and guilt associated with that. But it also must create some emotive feelings in caregivers as well, like going, well, I was always told you to clean your plate, so I need to now make mum clean her plate because that's what she's always taught me is the right thing, and a good person eats all of them food, sort of thing.
Very much so. And particularly the generation we're talking about, the post-war generation, it really was very much, let's not waste things. And again, that is a problem that I've encountered with certain people, that another lovely woman who didn't want to open a tin of soup because she didn't think she could eat it all and she didn't want to waste half the tin. And that's another rabbit hole we could go down about sort of manufacturers making them more appealing and bigger isn't always better. So yes, it's ingrained, particularly in the people we're trying to support, that I better not have something, I won't be able to finish it, so let's not waste it. But it's not wasted. If somebody eats half of the food that you're giving them, then half of that food is not wasted. If you don't give them that food, then all of it is wasted.
Something is so strange. It's something I've had to kind of mentally work on myself, because I was always going to you should clear your plate and don't waste food. But then I kind of came to this realization that if I force it in when I don't actually want it, it's still waste. So it's still, my body doesn't need it, so I'm still technically wasting it. So
yeah, that's a brilliant way of putting it. Absolutely, and we don't have to waste food. If we all know about batch cooking these days and whatever. Just because somebody wants a small portion or something, or a tiny half a sandwich, that doesn't mean to say the rest is wasted, but we need to support people in doing that. Introduce ways that we won't necessarily waste it, but you can cut down your portion size. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Overeating is wasting food as much as leaving it on your plate.
Have you ever encountered an adult or child's behaviour that has felt difficult, overwhelming, or challenging? Have you sometimes felt at a loss of what to do, or know that you didn't handle it quite right? People are complex and unpredictable, and their behaviour can be like the weather. We've all made the mistake of looking out the window and feeling safe to wear shorts, but 5 minutes later, wishing for an umbrella. But what if, like a weatherman, you understood how humidity, temperature and pressure all come together to cause the weather, allowing you to better prepare, predict and respond and prevent ever having a picnic ruined by a thunderstorm ever again? My book, called Targeting the Positive with Behaviours that Challenge, helps you to become the weatherman of behaviour. It provides you with a toolkit to increase competency, confidence, resilience and empathy, so you feel more assured about how to respond to distressed or dysregulated behaviours in others, including those affected by trauma, mental health, neurodiversity, learning disabilities or dementia. Build better connections, achieve de-escalation and improve outcomes for yourself and those you engage with my celebrated 6-stage target model, a step-by-step process to reduce distress for everyone. Discover my empowering, person-centered guide in Targeting the Positive, written by me, Andy Baker, available from online bookstores worldwide. Find a link in the description and order today. So obviously you give lots of different tips to family members, stuff like that. But what are the kind of the small changes that people can make that can make a big difference?
Yeah, and that is all I am. I do small changes because otherwise you're going to face resistance. So small changes. Now, I'm a huge shouter from the rooftops about whole milk. Whole milk. And the problem is we've been told to think that it's full fat milk. Oh, we mustn't touch that. It's full fat milk. Whole milk, full fat milk is 3.5% fat. A tiny amount of it is actually fat. But a lot of the really, really good fat-soluble nutrients are in that bit of fat. And if you go from whole milk down to semi-skimmed milk, you go from 3.5% down to 1.5% fat, which in the whole scheme of things isn't a huge amount of fat loss, but it's 50% plus of the fat-soluble nutrients. And there's been a lot of talk actually these days about how full-fat yogurts, full-fat milk are much better for you because if they take the fat away, particularly in yogurts and things like that, they replace it with all sorts of artificial rubbish and sugar and things that we're not designed to digest and get nutrition from. So absolutely full-fat milk, full-fat yogurts, Greek yogurt, as much as you can, because the fat isn't going to do anybody a huge amount of harm at that point, but not getting those nutrients will. So that's a big one for me. Yeah. And I'm also a big fan of eggs. Eggs are amazing. I mean, I don't know, you're probably too young to remember Edwina Curry, but okay. Your youthful good looks give that away.
Pull it off. It's the lighting.
Oh, okay. Well, you're sitting in the dark. Edwina Curry was, you mustn't eat eggs. Salmonella, really, really bad for you. The British Heart Foundation have now debunked all that and said you can eat as many eggs as you like. Now, eggs are fantastic. I say to people, you look at an egg yolk. Now, an egg yolk is all the nutrition that a tiny little bunch of cells need to form into a fully functioning, breathing, squeaking chick. Yeah. So an egg yolk is absolutely packed with all the really, really good nutrition that will build your cells, that will maintain your health. You know, all those really, really good things are in the yolk of an egg and also the white of an egg. But eggs also, not only are they jam-packed with amazing nutrition, they're so quick and easy to cook. And they're not expensive. You know, it's just an omelette here or there or a bit of scrambled egg. You know, if somebody really doesn't want to eat an awful lot and are worried, then do an omelette with some amazing whole milk and some nutritious bits of whatever, you know, a few vegetables and mushrooms and little bits of meat in them. I mean, an omelette's fantastic and you don't get a lot of waste. You can choose how many eggs you eat. I just think eggs are just amazing. I really do, at this point in life. What else would I suggest? Do you remember something called Marvel? Do you know something? Dried skimmed milk powder.
Yes.
Now, I'm going to take back what I just said, because I'd said that you should have full fat milk all the time. You can't really, unless you're on buying on Amazon. Should I say that? Buying on an online retailer.
Yeah.
It's not the BBC, thankfully.
No, good.
And it's all skimmed milk powder, but actually in that skimmed milk powder is a huge amount of protein. So if somebody's having a yogurt, if somebody's having a cup of coffee, if somebody is having anything with a sauce or whatever, make some of that dried skimmed milk powder into a thick cream. Ignore what it says on the tin about what the ratios are. Make it into a lovely thick cream, just with cold milk, easy. And then if you add that to anything somebody is eating, you're adding an awful lot of really good protein, and it's natural protein. I'm not talking protein bars and things like that, because, there's a bit of controversy about those at the moment. But skimmed milk powder, add it to as much as you can, and then you've got some really good protein on that one. And another piece of advice actually is, so I was talking about protein. I've been talking about fat in milk and lots of nutrients. Obviously, fat is important. You need fat for the synapses in your brain, and you need fat to be able to store a few things. So there's some really good fats out there. Avocados are amazing. They're like Marmite, aren't they? People love them or hate them. But in my book that you very kindly mentioned in the introduction, there is a recipe for chocolate mousse made out of avocados. And I swear blind, it's quite delicious. So, getting some oils in. And in this little section, I think the last thing I would like to talk about is fiber, because our digestion slows down as well as all sorts of things. And so we can get a little bunged up as we get older, which can then cause problems. And again, if you're constipated and your tummy is full, you're not going to want to put more food in. So you're in a catch-22 situation. Now, when we're young, we're told we should have wholemeal this and lots and lots of bran and whatever. Actually, our digestive system, the mucous membranes, I'm not a fan of those words, but it's just... It evokes nastiness, doesn't it? But your mucous membranes, your digestional tract, actually, if you think about the skin on the outside of your body is getting a little crepey and a little bit thinner, it's also on the inside. And if you go for high fiber when you're struggling with digestion, it can be too rough in later life. You can scratch it. It just bung you up a little bit more even. So I'm a huge advocate of oats. Oats are amazing. They're just as fibrous. They're also full of protein as well. And they're much gentler on the system. So change your breakfast cereal from whole wheat to oats if you can.
There's some really good little tips there. Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like there's obviously hundreds of little tips like that are available, which by the sounds like in your book, there's probably a few more and some recipes and things.
Absolutely. As I said, you can make ice cream interesting. Nut butter is an amazing thing. You don't just have peanut butter now. You can have almond butter. You can have cashew butter. Again, sorry to push the book, but there's a nut butter ice cream that you can make. You can add nut butter to soups. You can add all sorts of weird and wonderful things. You can try them. Somebody might say, no, I don't want it, but you've got to try it really sometimes. So yeah, there's some amazing products out there.
Well, I think this is a great opportunity as well with stuff like this, that so often family members are struggling to know what to do when they go to visit their relatives. They don't know how to connect. They're struggling for meaningful engagement. But as you said, if there's a reason that people like cooking, they like eating is a social thing. We can still be promoting independence, and I do a lot of work around the dementia world, kind of supporting people with meaningful activities. And it doesn't matter, even if it's towards a later stage, they can still be eating it, smelling it, touching it. They can still be part of the process. But actually cooking meals like that, try it out, experiment it, because they're probably going to be more likely to try something that they've actually been involved in creating and making.
Absolutely. I'm a huge advocate in getting someone involved in writing the shopping list, to getting excited about what you're going to be making today. And, should we tweak this and give a little bit of a change to that? Absolutely include the person. If you're caring for somebody, include that person into what they particularly want, and talking about memories and what they ate when they grew up. I mean, there I was going a bit yucky at the thought of a pressed tongue, but actually it was a thing of its era because meat was in short supply. So get the person you're caring for to reminisce about what they used to eat and maybe teach you some things. Give them control, give them some ownership of what you're trying to do. As I said, the change in relationship can be really hard. So we have to tread carefully. So try and make it a two-way thing. You teach them a few bits and bobs about how we can add nutrition, and they'll teach you a few bits and bobs about what they used to eat as well.
Something you mentioned there a moment ago actually kind of sparked the thought of, obviously one of the things is trying to promote eating. We did some work with a care organisation that was actually starting to use smells to promote appetite in their care settings. So they'd put the smell of coffee in the morning, helped to orientate and made people think about breakfast. They'd put the smell of baking bread through at lunch because, supermarkets use that to get you to buy more because the smell of baking goods makes you hungry. So other than that, is there other things that you can use to kind of promote and encourage appetite?
Absolutely. I mean, we could go back to the good old days and have a sherry before we have a meal. And I'm not saying that's a bad idea. That does get the body going and start to want to eat. So maybe introduce a little bit of sherry in the evening meal or something like that. I used to work in a care home actually on a dementia unit, and we would make meal times a very pleasurable idea. And I always put some music on in the background. Because again, it would, if you build a habit, you can still build a habit. So if you always put, I don't know, a bit of blues music on, then you're telling somebody that it's going to be time to eat and that they will sit and eat whatever the blues music is. I do say to people, if you're going to do that, don't put a sing-along track on, because too much conversation and too much singing can obviously cause a little bit of tricky. So put something musical on. Try to discourage too much conversation while you're eating, because that can be distracting, but it also can be, as I said, cause a little bit of choking as well. So get the ambience right, get the conversation about the food and the meal, have it before you eat, and talk about what you're doing and what you're going to have later, and revisit that as well. So, you talk about, tonight we're going to have, I don't know. We're going to have an omelette. Let's go back to that good old omelette. So tonight we're going to have an omelette, and then in a couple of hours you go, do you remember tonight we're going to have this wonderful omelette, and we're going to spice it up with a bit of something or other, and then just keep reminding them that this is going to happen. Yeah. Obviously, everybody is different, and some people might not react well to that because it might actually build up a resistance. Sometimes if you just put a plate of food in front of somebody and it's there and then, I think particularly sometimes with people with dementia, they'll just eat it. If you built it up to be a big thing, then it might be overwhelming as well. So you've got to take the personality of the person that you're talking to at the time. But yes, play with smells, have a drink. Don't have too much fluid with the meal. Obviously, you need a little bit to help it go down, but you don't want if somebody's really got a low appetite, you really don't want to fill up with fluids. Going back to the hints and tips, and you've just reminded me actually of something I talked about, or one of us talked about, a sandwich. Now, again, when I talk to people about family member who might not have a huge appetite, when you've got a sandwich, you've got bread, filling, bread. the least nutritious part of that is the bread. But if you've got a sandwich, 2/3 of that is bread. So I really encourage people to have open sandwiches, put things on crackers, put things on toast. You can still pick it up. You can still have it in little itty bitty pieces, which is important. But you can make now the filling, the bit that you can actually make healthy, is now 50% of that meal instead of 1/3 of it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's how I manage all you can eat buffets. I don't fill up on the carbs.
Yeah, exactly. Every mouthful matters, and the least important, to be honest, as we get older, is the carbs.
Yeah.
But actually the easiest to eat. As I said, you've got a sandwich, you've got a biscuit, you've got these things are finger food and they're really easy to eat. So you've got to be creative and think about, okay, we need a bit of carb, but how do we add the protein? How do we add the fruit and veg? How do we add the fiber? How do we add the fantastic fats and vitamins onto that?
Yeah, excellent. Obviously, you've mentioned things like fortifying foods, but what are your kind of top go-to snack ideas when somebody doesn't feel like eating? And you can obviously promote your cakes as well if they are a snack idea.
Oh, yes. Well, yeah, I'll come to those in a minute. I would say the go-to is bite-sized pieces. So picky bits. Picking through the day is actually to be encouraged, because if you haven't got a huge appetite, you are going to fill much more quickly. So small individual pieces throughout the day. Now, you mentioned, very kind of you, mentioned my cake bars. So going back to when my father lost his appetite, he and I created these nutritious brownie type cakes that, for all intents and purposes, look and taste like a cake, like a squidgy cake. And we've got now, a milk chocolate one, a dark chocolate and ginger, and a lemon one. And so they are packed with all those good things I mentioned. So they're made of oats, mentioned oats. They're made of nuts. I forgot to mention nuts earlier, but they're a fantastic source of protein and fat, and can be pureed. So they're made of oats, nuts, honey. Again, you do need a bit of sugar. You don't want to have too much refined sugar, but there's honey in those. Flax seeds. I've got flax seeds in them as well, and dried fruit, and a bit of chocolate, because you have to have chocolate sometimes. And actually, dark chocolate is brilliant, full of good things. And what they do have in them as well is they have chicory root. Now, chicory root has been proven that it is one of the prebiotics, not a probiotic, it's a prebiotic. And there has been a study done that they've given elderly twins, a prebiotic of chicory root, and one had a placebo. And actually, the person who had the chicory root, their memory skills and their reasoning skills were actually more improved by having this prebiotic, because as we know these days, our guts are the life source to us. We now know that that's where the hormones are made. We now know that that's, if you've got a healthy gut, you've got a healthy mind. It's all about having a really good healthy gut. And if you haven't got a healthy gut, then you're not going to digest food well. So it has a huge knock-on effect. So yeah, chicory root is a fantastic and it's fibrous as well. So it's really, really good. So yeah, these little cakes, they're amazing. They're called grand bars because my father was grandpa, and there's a picture of him on each packet actually. And yeah, they're not a meal replacement, but if somebody is going to go for a piece of cake or a few custard creams, perhaps, encourage them to have one of these grand bar cakes. They come in 2 little squares. So if somebody's a little bit wary, because again, we know that people can be very suspicious of what we're trying to feed them. So you've got 2 little bits. So you can say, oh, I'll have one. Would you like to share this? Or would you like to have one with your cup of coffee in the morning and one with your cup of tea at night? And they're delicious, they're tempting, but they're actually much more nutritious than a cake. So I would suggest small things, high nutrition.
So obviously you've worked with a lot of families, and you deliver courses and you do talks around this particular subject. Can you give me a story of an example where nutrition's really actually, you've seen it improve somebody's life by managing to turn their nutritional habits around?
Well, yes, absolutely. Do you remember I mentioned earlier about this woman who'd brought her mother home and the sausage and mash was not going to happen? So she called me in, and so because she'd known of me, and she said, "What on earth do I do?" And so yes, we sat down with Mum and we went right back to basics, and we introduced little finger foods, little bits of soup. But the soup we absolutely fortified with everything that we could. We put dried skim milk powder into the soup. We put double cream into the soup. We put nut butter in the soup. We put meat into the soup. We made that soup lovely and puree and easy to eat, but we packed it full of really good things like cooked tomatoes as well. And slowly but surely, trial and error, as again, took the sandwiches away, gave her things on crackers. And she did. She went from a frail and depressed, not really speaking woman to beginning to thrive, and then thriving a bit more, and a smile on her face, and she was interacting with people. And the best result was that she went home. She went home, a care package was put in place. So the situation kind of changed. But yes, she went back home. I mean, you can't ask for more than that, can you?
So is there kind of one thing? Do you notice the challenges, not just to people within their own homes and family members? Is this something you've come across like a challenge within the care sector as well?
Oh, totally. Very much so. As I said, especially when you're new to care, you're going to be eating at different times. You're going to be eating in a different place. You're going to be eating on a different plate. I also talk about when you go to hospital, because particularly again with this generation, they're used to eating at a table with a knife and fork. I think our generation, our little sandwich generation, we're the first sofa eaters. We're the first casual eaters. And so if you go into hospital or if you are bedbound, your body, your mind just cannot compute the fact that you're in bed and expected to eat a 3-course meal, a starter, a main course, and a pudding. It's really, really hard to change people's psyche like that. It's something, again, we need to look at, that you're not going to eat well in hospital, and we won't go down the rabbit hole of hospital food, but yeah, eating in a different situation is really, really hard. The good thing, though, about if we're in a care setting is that it becomes a social activity again. So I'm not knocking I'm not knocking care homes. They're also on a budget. Here we are talking about, well, you can try a bit of this and you can try a bit of that. Unfortunately, care homes are on a budget, and a very tight one, most of them, all of them. So they are, it's tricky that we've got to try and use what budget they've got wisely. But it is great that people are then eating again in a social situation and not having to grapple with the top of the milk bottle and have to cook it themselves. There's pros and cons to every side of being independent at home and making it yourself, but there's also a pro to being in a care situation where you're in a group of people and they're mirroring the food that the way that they want you to eat. You're all sitting around a table, you're all eating the same thing. You start doing unconscious eating. It is there's a great opportunity there for getting people's appetite back.
Yeah. There's quite a few things you've mentioned there, as far as where there is potential that some reasonable adjustments could allow people to maintain independence and keep eating. Opening the milk bottle top is one of those simple things. That there is gadgets, there is stuff out there that can help people, but it's still knowing about it is making it actually looking for them rather than just just assuming they can't anymore. One of the things I think. Sorry. Yeah.
I was going to say, what were you going to say? Yeah, we are new just like there's no rule book on parenting, and we get it wrong, but nobody notices because the kids are small and they don't tell anybody. But there's also, there's no book on parenting. On looking after your parents. So there's an amazing, huge amount of things. There are sort of easy pour kettles. Because that's another worry. Somebody's going to have a bit of a wobble and they're going to spill boiling water all over them. There's easy pour kettles. There are tin openers. There are, as you say, there's easy hold knives and forks. There are so many gadgets out there that a lot of the charities will promote and endorse. And if you start talking to your health visitor or perhaps your there's a social prescriber, many surgeries these days. If you want to talk to them or other people that have had the experience, it's amazing what's out there to help keep somebody independent at home.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, occupational therapists as well are sort of really worthwhile kind of reaching out to get some of those.
Occupational therapists are absolutely miracle workers, aren't they?
Yeah. Yes.
I cannot praise occupational therapists highly enough. I've been in situations, particularly at end of life care, and you've been wanting this and you've been wanting that. And as soon as the occupational therapists come, it's go, right, we're going to get this bed, we're going to get that, we're going to get that, we're going to get that. And they get delivered in a couple of days. I mean, they are I don't know how they do it, but occupational therapists are a law unto themselves.
When you can get them, that's the only challenge.
Yes.
There are few and far between, unfortunately, and there's not enough of them.
But they are miracle workers when they do work.
When you can find one, absolutely.
Yes.
Obviously, we've gone through quite a journey as far as kind of looking and exploring some of the challenges, some of the adjustments you can make. So is there kind of one thing that you wish every carer knew about food and older people?
Oh, goodness. Just that actually, as we age, we need just as much nutrition than when we were younger, because we are fighting things like we're fighting muscle wasting. We're fighting, if you've got a cut on your leg and if you're not eating enough protein, it's going to turn into a sore. We're fighting all that, and actually our body is less able to digest the food that we're eating. So it's an absolute myth that your calorie requirement and your nutritional requirement goes down even if you're less active. So every mouthful matters. And I think you said it before as well, cut the carbs. Carbs are not so important as you get older. Make sure that what somebody is eating is delicious, because there's no point giving somebody something that's really, really healthy if they don't want to eat it, because that ain't going to happen. So make it delicious, make it small, and make it count, and make it important. That was but you said
that's fine. This leads me on to another thing, actually. I think it's worth, Carla, maybe just touching on it very briefly if it's an area you're familiar with. Obviously, there is many people due to dysphagia, and they have trouble with eating and swallowing and things like that. So obviously they then have to move over to pureed foods or thickened foods and things like that sometimes aren't as appealing, definitely visually sometimes, as well as potentially taste-wise. Is there things that you recommend, whether it be for families or professional care settings, for that side of things as well?
Well, I think, there's obviously 7 sort of levels of dysphagia. And so just starting off really with slow cooked meat, make everything nice and soft and lots of sauces, make everything soft. You lose your ability to make enough saliva sometimes when you get older. So make lovely slow cooked meals and soups and things like that, but in small portions. And there are home delivery companies. Again, won't name names, but there are, and they have incredible factories that can puree food and then present it like proper food. I would say if you are supporting somebody to eat, rather than I don't like saying if you're feeding somebody, but if you're supporting somebody to eat, don't mix it all together. Keep it looking like it should for as much as possible, because mush isn't particularly appealing. But yeah, just start thinking about how you can puree things a little bit and make things softer, cook things more slowly. And understand that the fear of aspiration and the fear of choking is a real one. It's well founded as well, because obviously our muscles are become less strong, and so the muscle that shuts off your windpipe when you're eating, that can become a little bit loose and a little bit not as strong. So the fear of aspiration, and actually if you have had something go down the wrong way, it is the most horrible experience, isn't it? And as long as you're strong enough to cough it up, you're fine. Again, if you're older and you haven't got the lung capacity to cough something up, you've got to be really, really careful. So make it thick enough that it doesn't trickle into the lungs, but also make it soft enough that it's not going to cause a problem with chewing or swallowing.
Thank you very much. Thanks for that, Mary. Well, it's been a fascinating kind of conversation. I think there's so much more that you could kind of pass on with the stuff you've spoken about, especially some of the signs and things. So where can people find more about you?
Well, as you know, I have a website. So marymerheim.co.uk. You can buy my grand bars on grandbarsnacks.com, and they're also hitting Amazon this week, which is very exciting. And again, on Amazon, you can buy my book, which is Navigating Nutrition in Later Life. So yeah, if you want to get hold of me, there's ways you can do it on my website, or as I said, read the book or buy some grand bars and give them a try. You can buy a nice little trial pack of grand bars, which you can buy one of each flavor. So it's not, you're not investing a huge amount of money, and they don't suit everybody, but they might be a long-term or a short-term solution. I know somebody who actually had a load of box of grand bars when they went in for their chemotherapy because they really didn't fancy something to eat, but it's a long time that you're in there. And she was just nibbling away. So everything's worth a try.
Yeah, beautiful. We'll make sure that within the show notes and in the description, they can make sure they find all your links and everything like that to search you out and find you. And find some more info.
Sorry, I forgot. I'm on TikTok.
Yes.
I'm on Instagram.
Yes.
I'm on all of those, really. But yeah, you can find me on TikTok, Mary Merheim. Lots of little short bits of information on there.
It's beautiful. Lovely. Well, thank you so much, Mary, and thank you for your time today. It's been a pleasure having this conversation with you.
Oh, it's been great, Andrew. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. So for all of you listening and watching, if you found anything that Mary's gone through useful, interesting, then please like, comment and share, especially sharing it with loved ones or people that you know are caring for a loved one who is reaching the older stages of life. And this information, I think, was invaluable. So thank you very much.